a.m. start. He'll do the buses every other time, but actually just the access to work is paid for that. He also has a physical disability, which would have meant, you know, a lot of walking was really difficult for him. So I think being flexible, thinking about using occupational health, what's right for that individual is really important. So in summary for me, over the years, I've seen such a value of the peers now working shifts that I would actually want peers to do that. So over to you. Your question is, should peer workers be expected to work shifts?
Yes. Okay, this time I think I've learned. I think the best thing is for you to put your answer up. First of all, to put your cards up, and then we'll discuss some of the reasons why you voted the way you have once you've done that. Okay. So I know these aren't easy questions. In a way, it's always kind of yes but or no but. But one of our challenges is filling posts, shift posts. Should we be expecting peers, say, provided we provide all the kind of support and all the kind of benefits that work supports that we can, and including things like access to work, should peers be expected or required to work shifts? Yes or no?
Voting now.
Do one of them then.
Quite a big majority of yeses to that. So the questions we'd like you to discuss on the table is how do we make that possible and desirable for peers? Because one of our struggles here is actually trying to recruit peer support workers to work shifts. We've got peers out of work, got peers looking for work, but not peers who want to work shifts. So how we just have a chat on the tables about how do we enable this. Okay, I'm glad to see there's some active discussion and debate going on. Can we just ask you to go around to different tables and just take a couple of comments from them and take these tables? Just a bit, can we just listen to what people are saying?
We had a bit of a debate, but we're thinking about it, workers and individual needs. And trying to look what our consensus was, it seemed like a bit of a yes and no, because you have some people who...
Can you speak up a little? Sorry.
So you have some people who would work really well the shift, some of the people who, end up with a psychotic break.
So it's about the need for not just peers but all staff.
Yeah, all staff.
So probably one of the things after a bit of a heated discussion is that actually everybody might find shifts difficult, and the skill lies in supporting everybody to stay well whenever they're working. I think ultimately we might have come down and agreed on that. Let's try another table. Try and talk really so that people can benefit from your wisdom. Just try and talk loudly. Yeah?
Yeah, we had a bit of a conversation with regards to sort of different people's definition of shift work. So for some people, shift work is anything that deviates from a 9 to 5 pattern. But for somebody else, it could mean sort of it's that they're very sporadic, sort of sometimes doing 7 till 3, sometimes doing 2 till 10. And I worked that latter kind of shift pattern for a number of years, and I found it very difficult. I never really adjusted and never felt comfortable in predicting what my pattern was going to be like. I found it very difficult to plan things. So for some people, if you're working a shift that is, say, a regular sort of 7 till 3, say 3 days a week, and that is your pattern, that's going to be far easier, I think, to adjust to than a shift pattern that is all over the place and being told, well, you're expected to just do this. I suppose it's the give and take of working sort of outside of the 9 to 5 box, but having that control and that ability to say, well, this is what will work for me.
Yeah, okay, so again, having some control is important, and some things are very extreme. We take somebody down the bottom end, and then I've made it. Do you like to talk, Rachel? How unusual. No, we're going to take somebody at the bottom end first.
Hello, hi. I'm from Leicester, LPT. We're in the very early stages of developing peer support workers, and I think we're trying to learn the pitfalls you know, the mistakes and sort of, you know, before we even start. And I think that as a manager of staff, that all of them have got, some of my staff have got specific needs. And I think well-being and looking after your staff, if you're really good at doing that, then a peer support worker would, you know, it'd be the same as anybody else, any other member of staff. But I do feel managers that don't do that very well with their core staff will struggle because, you know, it's about sustaining the resilience of your team. And I think there is a commitment there, and I think it's about being mindful about how much care and sort of how you need to look after your staff. And I think that peer support workers have a, you know, there is some other vulnerabilities there, and, you know, and I think we need to consider some of that. And if people, you know, there needs to be kind of a collaboration between you and your staff in looking after them.
So you need to keep all your staff well.
You do, and I think you need to be really good at that as well. So, but shift work, as again we were saying, it's about the individual, and like with any member of staff, it's about kind of, you know, looking after their well-being, their needs, and being flexible.
Okay, good, thank you. And actually, lots of these things were covered in the workforce learning setting. If you, at lunchtime maybe, have a look or read at the posters. Thank you. Now, I'm going to... Oh yes, Rachel wanted to talk.
I'd just like to remind you of the law. Actually, there is a framework for thinking about this, and it's called the Equality Act. And there is a requirement to make reasonable adjustments to accommodate any impairment-related factors in order to allow you access to work. And that applies whether you're a nurse, whether you're a peer support worker or anyone else. So why don't we just have to think about it in terms of reasonable adjustments? For some people, we are required as the NHS or any employer to make those adjustments. For others, they're not.
Yeah, okay.
And sometimes it gets beyond what is reasonable for that job.
Yes, I think that's what I was thinking, was that actually one of the challenges we have is that we can find posts for peer workers who can work shifts. But although we have peers looking for jobs, they don't feel able to work those shifts. So somehow we need to equip them, support them, yes, but also it's hard for everybody.
As an employer, though, you have to show that those shifts are an absolute requirement of the job and no adjustments are possible. Sorry. There is a legal framework which we're required to obey, and I think we ought to look to that across all of our posts.
And I think if you don't, I was saying earlier, including myself, that actually, if you're going to advertise a role for a peer support worker and someone obviously with lived experience is going for a peer support worker role, if they're actually physically or mentally unable to work a shift pattern but they really want the job, if it's advertised over shift patterns, then again are you in breach of the Equality Act in terms of discrimination, direct discrimination, indirect discrimination. So I think that adherence to the law is a real big one, and it's quite difficult, really, I guess.
As with all the other issues around peer support, it is a tricky one. So we can learn some lessons around keeping people well, around using the right frameworks, around thinking around team, the whole team constitution, the team support that's provided. I've made a kind of unilateral decision now to think that we're actually going to have a coffee break now instead of after Emma, because we've got a missing speaker after coffee. So
Anyone who spoke
heated conversations, lots and lots of different opinions, and this isn't an easy subject, is it? It's not straightforward. And we're still not actually drilling down to key questions around the role of peer support workers and things, but we are starting to at least identify what those key questions are. One of the issues which we've come across in a number of different organisations is, peer support workers and social media, something around where our friends are and whether people who bring their lived experience who've used the services actually have friends who might also be patients in the service that they've already used, and how are we going to work out what we can and can't say. And Emma's going to have a bash at trying to give us some clarity on the issue of peer support and social media. So welcome, Emma. Should we clap for her?
Hi everyone. I don't think that there's been enough emojis this morning yet. So I live in the 21st century. It's the only way that we can communicate emotion these days. So it's going to be quite a lot of emojis. So hands up, please check Facebook this morning. Or tweeted, or Instagram. Yeah, quite a lot of people. So I think social media is a massive part of how we all communicate. And I think the way it's emerged, it's grown so quickly and so stealthily that I don't think really that policy has caught up. So I think most companies have policy around social media, but there are still quite a lot of grey areas and quite a lot of unanswered questions, particularly when it comes to peer support or supportive relationships in mental health. So I thought I would just ask those questions today because I don't really have any answers, so I thought I'd just stir the pot. But before I do that, I want to just think about the potential that social media can offer us. So thumbs up emoji, positive potential of social media. First of all, social media can connect us to huge networks. In this room, we can now talk to people that are on different continents, that live in different time zones, like within 30 seconds, and it's incredible. And for peer support, the potential of those networks to find connection is really clear. So things like Mumsnet or Patients Like Me or Elefriends, they're all communities that have emerged online where people have come together based on a shared experience to access support and share expertise based on those. I think peer support happens in social media quite naturally. And the added benefit of social media is that you can do it from the comfort of your own armchair. You can sit in a room on your own and crack a joke and get a laugh. And that's really, really helpful if you're somebody that doesn't feel like they want to go out today, or doesn't feel like they want to talk to people face to face, or doesn't feel able to express themselves using conversation. Maybe writing is easier. So it really expands the potential of peer support for people that might struggle to access support in other ways. Thumbs down emoji, negative potential of social media. I think it potentially increases anonymity. So my identity on social media, it could be completely different. I could choose to share very little, or I could choose to become somebody completely different. I could change my identity completely by sharing maybe falsehoods or maybe bending the truth to become something that isn't actually congruent with who I am. This is just my personal thought. I don't know what other people think, but I think social media potentially can decrease empathy in that the responses that I sometimes see on social media are different to the responses I think people would give if they were face to face. Have you ever heard of the term hate reading? I came across it the other week where people can scan down their Twitter feed or their Facebook feed and be actively looking for things that anger them or make them disgusted or upset. And I guess it's a form of trolling, but it shocks me because I don't think people walk through life like that. They just access social media like that. And lastly, I think social media can increase proximity, which is a really great thing, but also can have really negative consequences. And I think it does it in two ways. It increases the proximity between you and I. So I could search for any of you on Facebook, and I could find you potentially. I could find out what you did this weekend. I could find out where you used to work. I could find out, look at pictures of your family. And that is a proximity that you have no control over, that you haven't chosen for us to have. And I think it also increases the proximity between what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. So maybe in years before social media, I would have a thought and I might write it in my journal, or I might think on it for a while and then it might go, or I might discuss it with a friend the next day. But I can have a thought and I can tweet it immediately. So I think that that changes the nature of communication that we see in social media, in that it's instant and it has a permanency because it's written and it will stay there, but it also has an impermanency in that was a fleeting thought that I just shared. So those are my thoughts on the potential of social media, and in a way it doesn't really matter how those stack up. It doesn't matter if the positives outweigh the negatives or the other way around, because we're not going to sit here and decide let's never use social media because it's evil. So it's about how we use social media in a healthy, positive way, not let's not use it. And I think a lot of this applies to every member of staff, like the debates all do, I suppose. But for social media and peer support, I think there are a few things that are unique to peer support workers. So peer support workers have friendship groups that include people who are using mental health services and staff members. And I think that is one thing that's really beautiful about peer support is quite often people say that peer support workers act as a bridge between people who use services and people who work in services. But I think it's that idea of proximity again. It draws those two groups closer together in a social domain in a way that people don't have control over, and that might feel uncomfortable. Also, peer support workers may adopt different levels of disclosure on social media and in their working lives, given that social media is a social place and work is work. Maybe if you think about those circles of disclosure, they go in different places, and it might come as a surprise to some people, the mismatch between what people share face-to-face and what people share on social media. And I know peer support workers that share a huge amount on social media that they wouldn't talk about face-to-face. And I also know people like me that are quite wary of sharing things on social media, and I don't think that people would know, looking at my Facebook, that I am a peer support worker or that I have experienced mental health problems, because I don't want my friends on Facebook to know that necessarily. So lastly, I think peer support workers work in a mutual way, and that's one of the values that really underpins peer support is the idea of equality. And so there isn't immediately that sense of power imbalance in the relationship that sends the message of I can't be your friend on Facebook because you are a professional. And so it invites questions about where does the boundary lie between this peer support worker and a friend, and can I add them on Facebook or not? Are they staff, or this feels really close, so maybe it's something more. So it leads me to a few big questions on peer support, and the first one is to friend or not to friend, thoughtful emoji. And I think that it applies to staff members as well as people that peer support workers support. So if I am employed in a staff team, I would normally add those people on Facebook, but does that bring me dangerously close to the people who have provided me with support? So I'm only one friend away from the people in my own care team. And are there some members of staff that would feel uncomfortable with that? Or are there some members of staff that would use that to check up on me, or to check up on friends of mine who they may know? And also, friending peers. If peer support is based on mutuality, then shouldn't we be friends on Facebook? And I think it really shines a light on the idea of boundaries in peer support and what is social and what is work. So the next question is, where is the boundary between work and personal lives? Work emoji, confused emoji, home emoji. And I think this is a real question for a lot of debates in peer support, and not just on social media, but I think it's a debate that we have more often in peer support in general, and we don't necessarily think about the social media element of it. So I suppose it's a difficult question because in peer support the social is tied up in work, and when I'm at work, if I'm with a peer, I'm not necessarily thinking this is work. I'm thinking these are our recoveries, and they're tied to each other. So it sort of seeps into my personal life, because work is my personal life, recovery is in both places. So I suppose I wonder whether things like tweeting about work, is that a really positive thing, or is it a breaking of boundaries, or should I keep those two separate? And is training people on using social media a really positive thing, a really necessary thing, or is it telling people how to live their personal lives? Is it an intrusion too far into what people do outside of work? And I suppose the idea of saying that you can't be friends with people on Facebook, is that watering down peer support? Is that cutting off an avenue where peer support could really have a lot of potential? Or is it making it a sustainable thing? And I don't have any answers to those questions. So I'll leave you with a question for debate, is how can we support all staff to positively navigate social media?
Yes or no to that one, haven't you? Okay. There is. You have 5 minutes to just think about this. It is critical. It is actually a critical issue which we need to think about for everybody.
I think it was, we were just generally having a conversation around the importance of having clear guidance for staff, and that's all staff, around policies for using online media, what's appropriate and what's not. But I also think it's really important that we're looking at there being forums for peer support that are very clear that they are forums for peer support, and that social media and your own personal social media is something different. But there were some really interesting debates about, well, even if you're not a peer worker, you probably offer a lot of peer support to your friends because of circumstances or things that happen. So those things happen naturally. Really valid point around training as well. And actually, there are a lot of things you can do with your social media account. So think about accepting friends, but perhaps having limits in terms of who you share what sort of information with, how you put filters on, those kind of things. So training for people around how to sensibly and safely use social media is probably the key, really.
Great. That takes us to a very interesting point just before our next speaker, which is the voting question, which is then, should there be training for all staff on how to positively use social media? Okay, that's a unanimous yes. Brilliant, okay. Thanks, Emma, for raising some of the questions. And this is a moving this kind of developing all the time, isn't it? You know, I'm constantly amazed, and it's interesting, on the table that I was on, all the people over a certain age were saying, oh, I'm far too paranoid to use social media. They're saying they're too paranoid to use it. It's like I challenged them to think that actually if they were under a certain age, they wouldn't be saying that today. I think it is there is a bit of an age thing here. So, yeah, we need to start developing training. And we need to absolutely, I think, ensure that we do introduce it in our peer support training, just to raise awareness, to make people more sensitive about this. Thank you then, Sarah. That's really well summarised, kind of summary of the kind of issues that need to be discussed. Now, the next question, and it's one that's very close to many people's hearts, is how do we kind of increase numbers of peer workers within our service to achieve a critical mass of peers within the workforce without excluding the kind of skills, talents, interests, passions of other staff who aren't necessarily professionally qualified? And I think we brought in Natalie Livesey from Kent, where they've been using kind of why not a peer as one of their strategies. But I want to leave enough time here to really try for other people to tell us about their ideas. But Natalie, thanks very much for agreeing to come and speak to us about what you've been doing in Kent.
Hello. Yes, my name is Natalie Livesey and I am from Kent and Medway Partnership Trust. My role is peer support lead, which I have been doing now for a year this month. So I'm really pleased about that. And I started off in the trust as a peer support worker, working for the Early Intervention in Psychosis service, which previously I had been under that service myself. So I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you about our journey in terms of where we are at now, and just listening to some of the conversations today and this, talking to you, we're all at such different points. So yeah, I hope this is informative for you. So where we started, basically, the concept of employing somebody with lived experience into our trust came about in 2012, and commissioners had asked key members in our trust to really think about peer support, which hadn't really been considered before. I mean, we'd heard about it in our drug and alcohol services, but not really, within our communities, on the acute wards, in rehab, that sort of thing. So we set about talking to external providers, different organisations, and really gauging, okay, where do we start with this? What does it mean? From job descriptions to interviewing to everything. So a lot of steering groups were formed, a lot of conversations were had, and very quickly they realised they had gained quite a lot of momentum in terms of, okay, we've got a lot of information and we think we're good to go with this. So they recruited their first cohort of peer support workers, and I think that was just 3 or 4 at that time, and they recruited a few more. They then had a conference within the trust, invited directors, external agencies, where reflections could be given on terms of, how it was, now that there was some people in post, and really educated those that was not aware of peer support. So that conference really was a big milestone in terms of where we went with our peer support. So education and promotion has been huge in my role as a peer support lead. So there in the promotion part, making the most of every opportunity, I really try, and wherever I can see, I'll, if I can be involved in that interview or go to this conference or be involved in that steering group, I will. Because there's always that potential of another conversation of talking about peer support and what it means within our trust and what impact it's having on the service users and on the staff. Because now there has been a big culture shift in the time that I've been a peer support worker. I have seen lots of change, and I think that's due to the conversations and the energy that we put into promoting what peer support means, and to create opportunities. We know there's not the money available at the moment for us all, but to be really creative in what we're doing. So we wanted to host a conference this year but we were told that actually there aren't the funds to do so. So we thought, okay, what can we do? So we're having a peer support awareness week. So we've got bits of money from here and there. I've asked very nicely to different service line directors. So I've got some stickers and this, that and the other, some seed packets that we're going to give out. But just all thinking really creatively in this week to really showcase what we're about. And I think that's what peer support is about. You know, we are really creative people and are making the most of every opportunity that we can, which is why we are gaining so much momentum at the moment. Educating the staff has been a real learning process for me, because there are a lot of preconceived ideas when I have certain conversations. But what I found when I thought about this slide is how similar my approach is to educating the wider group of staff in the Trust and to educating peer support workers throughout their employment in the Trust. And so you can see that they're very similar. And I think what I want to cover with staff and professionals is the basics. To not overcomplicate what we're about, because I think very often that can happen, and stripping it back down to really what we do offer is really quite powerful. And when questions are asked, it's a lot about, so who said that, where's the research to suggest that, and they can be quite difficult conversations, so I found to always go in with a nice piece of evidence or a research paper that has said something to back up my point, because they like the black and white. And it has to be tailored to each service line, and to each professional group, because each are wanting to know different things, and how is that going to impact me, and what does that mean for the services that we're delivering. So I really have to think when I'm going to different teams to be individual and tailored to what their thought processes are. And to manage their expectations of what peer support workers can offer to our service users and what they can offer to the wider team. And reflection, I think, giving that time for them to come back with questions and leave it open. Time has been a really powerful thing in our Trust, and as I said, I've seen such a shift in the 3 years that I've been in the Trust, employed. And I think that's because we give that reflection time and that pause for thought and open to those questions. And education of peer support workers. So that first cohort that we introduced, we brought in some training. And part of the peer lead role was to look at how we could develop a really robust in-house training programme, which Julie had kindly helped us with. So now we provide a 4-day training programme for our peer support workers, and in that we cover the basics of what peer support is. We cover boundaries and protecting ourselves and our own well-being and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. We cover all of that. But what we also do is throughout their employment, on a 10-weekly basis, we will all meet. So we come from across the Trust and we meet in one hub point, and we'll have a whole day where we have a learning set, and they're planned throughout the year. So they have ongoing learning and their managers also know what they're learning throughout the year. So it's all planned. And that day is also for them to have peer-to-peer sort of group supervision, which they find really helpful. And that's all part of their education and development. And expectations, you know, what to manage what they're expecting from their job, and what service users are expecting from them, what, you know, the wider team staff members are expecting from them. It's really useful to ask questions and leave it open that they can, you know, they can always ask about certain things and concerns, and to give time for reflection. That's really powerful, I think, for our peer support workers. So employing our peer support workers to date has been really, I'll be honest, quite inconsistent in the approach. So they all come through NHS jobs and apply the same way as every other post. They then go through the same shortlisting process, and then they come through to interview. Most posts that we recruit for peer support workers, we get on average about 65 applicants. Which is huge. We have a real crisis at the moment with nurses, but yet, you know, we have this huge influx of peer support applicants, and I think actually, you know, that's credit to the peer support workers that we currently have, you know, working with service users that leave services and then want to return as peer support workers. So the whole application process is exactly the same as any other profession. However, what I've found to be quite inconsistent is when somebody is recruited as a peer support worker, when a peer lead, like myself, or a recovery lead, who we also have, when somebody is recruited, we're not notified. So the support structure that we offer, both for the line manager and for that new employee peer support worker, it's not fair. So sometimes there is, you know, a real dip in what's being offered, and an inconsistent level of support for that peer support worker and manager. So that's something that we're really trying to tighten up on, and part of my role at the moment is working with our HR and recruitment team to make sure that as soon as a post is recruited to, that we're notified to give that support. All our peer support workers are line managed within their teams, so we don't have a separate peer support workforce in its own right. Each peer support worker is currently placed in their own community team, rehab, acute, so they're all line managed independently, which is where some of the inconsistencies come, because if their line managers aren't fully on the same page and educated to the level of peer support that really is a requirement, then, you know, you get an inconsistent feeling amongst the peer support workers. So as I've put on there, we have a peer support workshop meeting, so that's where we offer the support and the ongoing training. But what we also suggest to each peer support worker during their employment is that they have a RAP plan. It's not mandatory, it's just something that we discuss in these meetings that would be really helpful for that to be kept in their personal file. And that's completely up to them. But we've found that every peer support worker has taken this up and has found it really, you know, beneficial in terms of, you know, what they want to happen, you know, if they were to become unwell or just having a bad day. And then line managers also feel really comfortable with this because quite often they feel quite in the dark about what they could offer and what is right and what is wrong. But actually this document is really quite powerful in the employment support structure of a peer support worker. And I mean, support from the peer lead, which is me, which I job share with a colleague of mine. So there's 2 people in the trust currently that is offering both line managers and peer support workers support in the whole employment process of peer support. So I think where the investment in my role was given, that was a great opportunity for myself, but also for the trust to really push forward with creating really robust structures and gaining momentum. And career progression has been a big thing in terms of keeping our current peer support workers, because although we're growing, we are losing some peer support workers too, to, I guess, they get to a point where they feel, okay, I'm at a certain point, where can I go now? And really creating opportunities for them to still keep the essence of what they're doing, but open up other doors and other training. So that's an avenue which we're really looking at to still keep our workforce, but create opportunities within that for their careers. We're not quite there yet, but something that is really high on my priority list. So that's some of us. I just thought I would show you some of our faces, and I don't know if it's quite clear, it's not that clear, but what I did want to show you is where we are currently based, and the orange stars are where we're spotted. So through the centre part of our county, actually we're missing quite a few. And it wasn't until that I put this together which I really realised, oh, hang on a minute, there's a big gaping hole in the centre of our trust, and why is that? So, so that they're questions to be asked, but where we are predominantly based is within the community teams, on the acute wards, and in our rehab units. Where we are not at the moment is in forensic and specialist services and in older adults. But again, there are conversations happening around employing somebody with a forensic history and how to overcome the DBS checks and various other things that are involved in that recruitment. But still it's still sort of a hurdle that I am really trying to overcome, because I think to create our critical mass, we need everybody. We need peer support workers in all of our services. And I just wanted to show you some of our feedback, which again I don't think is quite clear to you all, but what's been really important throughout our growth is that we are evidencing that peer support work is effective in our trust. So we've used something called Inspire, which is a 5-question questionnaire, feedback form, and they tick from not very good to very good. There's a scale, and there's some narrative at the end, and you know it's quite clear to see. Oh, there we go. Not at all to very much, and you can see that we score really highly, and that has gone a long way with with our service line directors to recruiting more peer support workers. And from that, I just wanted to share with you some of the narrative that we've captured from that. I'm on track to complete I'll be discharged soon, and that's due to my peer support worker. My worker helps me to keep a balance. I can see a better future for me because I can see how far my peer support worker has come. I feel able to get my life back. I can understand a new life ahead, thank you 100%. I feel in control of my life. My peer has shown me never to give up hope. He put everything into perspective. That's when my recovery started. And I mean, I'm sure you're all thinking the same as me, how powerful those sentences are, and that really has gained a lot of ground with growing our workforce. So we've done lots of positive things, and we've come, a long way. We have 22 peer support workers, as I said, across the trust, but that hasn't come without, lots of challenges that we're still trying to overcome. And I really liked this quote, which I use a lot. We cannot direct the wind, but we can adjust the sails. And that's by Dolly Parton. And I think it says it really nicely that actually, we have to be really flexible in the infancy of where we are with our workforce. We have to kind of go with it and, and take on board what people say and adjust what we're doing accordingly. But I just wanted to run through some of the challenges with you that myself and my workforce have faced. It was really difficult to get the investment to having a peer support lead, but they managed to get it, and I think it has been really positive for the workforce and really consolidated a lot of things. In terms of the role variation, so I've heard a lot today about peer HCAs. We don't have peer HCAs or peer STR workers in our service. It's peer support worker. And it has been discussed a lot at our meetings that we gather for. We are very careful to keep the real essence of what peer support is about, and for it not to be blurred by being another role, unless it's in the job description to do so. And I think as how the economics are at the moment, it's very easy for the roles to be pulled this way and that way. But what we really want to do is keep that pure essence of what we're delivering. That being said, somebody said earlier that whether you're serving meals or making a bed, that's still an absolute opportunity for a therapeutic conversation. And that's what I say to all the peer support workers. If you are happy in the task that you're undertaking, if you feel that is within the peer support remit, then fine, go ahead, crack on. But if you feel like it's being, like the job role is being, skewed quite slightly, then I think, that's when we have conversations to, bring that back in. So that has been a challenge with that. And a challenge with that around education, because certainly around shifts, our trust employs a lot of agency staff and bank staff. So for me to try and educate them about peer support, it's very limited. So quite often the nurses that are on these shifts think that peer support workers are support workers or HCAs. Wrap it up.
I can't believe how long I've been told that, but I'm just a bit going to click on.
Sorry, I could talk all day about this. But yeah, so there's a bit of education around that. There's no ring fence money at the moment for us, so it really is about me talking to teams about being creative with their budgets and looking at how other roles can be converted into peer support workers. So there's other bits on there which I'll skip, because we do have a 2-year strategy now that we've just put together, which does include growing our workforce to have 2 peer support workers in every team, to continue being, you know, having this approach and making the most of all opportunities. And we've actually been able to have a slot on our corporate induction, so every employee coming into the trust will be able to know about peer support. What I did want, have I got a minute? Can I have 1 minute? What I wanted to share with you is my thought on, when I thought about critical mass, I thought of, you know, like a flash mob. Have you heard of a flash mob where, you know, you see these random people stand up dancing or singing and come together? And that's what made me think about peer support workers in my trust, that actually, you know, they pop up here and there, and sometimes people look at them as it's strange, they think, what's he doing? But coming together, they really make quite a profound noise and such an impact. And that's what we're achieving with critical mass. And so what I want to share with you is a short recording of a piece of music and a group of people singing on a ward. And they chose this song, and I don't know how to get it. Sorry. Yeah, they chose this song because they thought it reflected peer support. So this peer support worker set up a music group, and I thought it was just quite metaphoric of this flash mob that I was thinking. So it's not quite polished and perfect, but peer support isn't. Everyone hear that?
In times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. In my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be.
Currently having 1 or 2
Sorry, so it's like a bit long-winded.
It is, but I think this is what you thank you very much. I think I've got loads of questions for us, but I'm just worried that it's lunchtime. Can we continue a discussion about this over lunch? Because it is quite important how we get a kind of critical mass of peers, how we increase numbers in the workforce. I'm sure we can continue to ask questions on the debate, and then we can hang out from there. Something we need to keep thinking about, isn't it? How do we, I mean, you didn't really hear, I wanted to ask how are posts created? How do people, you're persuading people and educating them, but how are the posts created? are they additional to the current workforce or are they replacing the current workforce? They're all really important questions that we need to ask, but we're running a bit late for lunch, so I do want to get us back on track. So keep discussing over lunch, please, and half an hour then, half an hour for lunch. Thank you. Well done. If there is one person who can answer all the questions that exist around peer support, it's Rachel Clemens. So, here we go.
Can you hear me? I don't have any answers, but I'll give you some more questions. And I think Julie gave me this title so I could talk about whatever I want. I wanted to see her on Saturday and she said, what am I supposed to be talking about? Whatever you want. So I'm afraid I've taken her serious. And I guess I come from a place where I spent about a quarter of a century in no man's land, except I hate the gender specificity of that. And being both a sort of senior provider of mental health services, started out as a clinical psychologist and then became a director and stuff like that, and being a mental patient. And I think those two perspectives have actually been rather interesting, and actually they wind you up in some quite interesting positions. You know, I'll be sitting there with a group of people who are service users, and I suddenly realise I've been in more wards than I've had hot dinners, but I'm the professional. And it's that kind of middle, being in between, that's been quite interesting. And I suppose I've done a huge amount of sort of thinking around peer support. And what I hope to do is to share some of that thinking with you today. And just to make things difficult, I actually have come to the conclusion